Well, what happens if Greece defaults? That Greek word chaos seems to be the only answer as Greeks head back to the polls to what's being cast as a referendum on the euro. It opens the door to the very real prospect of Greece's exit from the eurozone, plunging it deeper into recession. And as Neil Woolridge reports, default and depression has been the bitter experience for other impoverished nations.
Plenty of talk but no progress in Athens, and now what was once unthinkable has become a real threat: Greece's exit from the European Monetary Union.
I think it would mean complete chaos. You're probably looking at a banking system collapsing in Greece as people withdraw their deposits currently denominated in euros. You're probably looking at a 50 to 70% collapse in the new currency, which would ultimately lead, I think, to some form of hyperinflation.
And it's also estimated Greece's exit from the eurozone would see its economy shrink by half, the value of savings wiped out, and unemployment, already at 21%, soar even further.
You're potentially looking at a huge bout of fiscal austerity because Greece would have to immediately balance their budget and they wouldn't be getting the funding from the EU and the IMF, which in turn would mean a further contraction in the Greek economy.
Argentina is the most recent financial crisis, similar in size to Greece. Its economy shrivelled in half and Argentina eventually defaulted on its debts.
It was quite tough living in Argentina in the early 2000s when there was a lot of protests on the street, people out of work. You have no money, you couldn't take money out of the bank. They allow you to only take a little bit for the day, but then your money wasn't there anymore.
A decade ago, Damien Blumenkrank was living and working in Argentina, and he says there's been little improvement since.
At the moment it's quite hard. They close imports and no one can buy anything, but people get used to it. So if you live there, you get used to it, you live by, it's not a problem. But it's quite dangerous, it's very unsafe.
There's a long history of monetary unions falling apart, most recently the Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia. Based on those, it's likely Greece would experience a flight of capital to stronger European nations, government seizure of assets, capital controls and even more civil unrest, requiring greater police and military activity like border controls.
I suspect most savers will be basically wiped out. And a lot of jobs will be lost because a lot of industries and things will contract. They'll be, to an extent, kicked out of the euro region to be able to access the export sectors there.
Global equities investor Chad Padowitz says if Greece leaves the euro, there's likely to be a flight of capital from other southern European nations as well, destabilising their banking systems and economies. But he says money could eventually flow back into Greece, provided it gets its house in order.
Capital markets have a surprisingly short memory in terms of default because there's a lot of capital out there that's happy to make some sort of risk-return trade-off. And if that makes sense, for a higher return, they might take that risk again.
Indeed, other nations have grown strongly after financial crises like South Korea, India and Russia. But a necessary first step has always been a very painful clean-up, something that Greece has not even started.